Good morning, students. My name is Mohini and through this video, I will be taking your social studies. Our today's topic is of history, European powers in India, part 1. In this, we are going to discover topics such as mercantilism, the trade wars between the different European countries, and the settling of British East India Company in India. So let's start with the first topic, mercantilism. This term was first coined by Scottish economist Adam Smith. It simply means commercialism. It followed the concept of acquiring national wealth through maximum number of exports and accumulation of precious metals like gold and silver. It is a political and economic system that arose in the 17th and 18th century, and it is directly related to the maintenance of a positive balance of trade. It mentioned that to acquire wealth, every country should export the maximum quantity of goods and restrict its imports, that is, earning money, through selling out goods, but it was only a one-way system and it had various advantages as well as disadvantages. So, first, let's have a look at some of the advantages of mercantilism. The first one is it focused on prosperity of nations. As it already focused on exporting the goods to other countries and places and returned to earn splendid amount of money, it focused on the prosperity and development of nations financially and economically. The second one is it helped in industrial growth. Mercantilism also brought industrial growth as there was need of surplus for export. The growth of industry led to more production which could meet the demand of the people and could create surplus which was exported. Surplus means the extra amount of produced goods. Therefore, leading in the growth of industry also caused the increased generation of employment and jobs. Overall, it can be said that mercantilism was profit-oriented system. Third advantage was that it promoted foreign relations. Mercantilism helped the countries to increase foreign relations because as the trade increased with foreign countries, the commercial and cultural relations also developed among the different countries. Hence, it promoted the friendly relationships between countries due to trading with each other. And the last one is it paved the way for new inventions. Mercantilism paved the way for new inventions when trade and commerce flourished. More demand for new goods rose, and due to it, the people were required to invent new things to increase the potential of machines, which could produce even more. Thus, due to the increasing demand for the goods by the people, there was a need to provide more and more supply to them, and for that, better and improved machineries were required. So, it also enhanced the new inventions and more developments were made in the making of modern plants and machineries. Thus, the new inventions brought revolutionary change in case of production. However, there were some disadvantages of mercantilism as well, such as it created conflicts among the European countries. Lots of emphasis was put on money and profit earning, and the merchants and traders focused extremely on accumulation of precious metals such as gold and silver, which were never true wealth of a country, but the natural resources and the factories were the actual wealth of a country. And in this process, the European merchants blindly ran after these precious metals and could not serve people properly. This in turn brought conflicts among the European countries as each country wanted to be more powerful in comparison to the other, and this shook up the balance of power in Europe. Secondly, it gave birth to colonialism. The European countries produced surplus of goods for more and more export and earning of profits, and therefore the European countries needed markets for selling of the surplus goods. Countries like England, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, etc. all were in this race, and this created a severe enmity among different countries. Next, it only emphasized on exports. Mercantilism was a one-way traffic. it put emphasis on exports only, but not import. Export means to sell out the goods from one country to another and to earn money in return, whereas import means to buy goods from another country and to pay them the required amount for those goods. But this did not have the countries who relied and emphasized solely on export, and instead of earning profits they went into loss. Lastly, the sole concentration was only on trade and commerce. Mercantilism only focused on the earning of profits and on the selling of goods, and it highly neglected the other important aspects of life such as education, agriculture, welfare of common people, etc. Therefore, mercantilism was highly criticized later on. Our next topic is trade wars. As some major trade routes were discovered through sea route to India, the trade wars started among different European traders, namely the Portuguese traders, the Dutch traders, the French traders, and the British traders. The first we will discuss about the Portuguese traders. The Portuguese were the first to find a new sea route to India. Years later, Vasco da Gama, under the patronage of King Emmanuel, set out for India. He reached Calicut in India in 1498, and in spite of the opposition from the Arabs, the Portuguese were able to establish their trading centers at Calicut, Cochin, and Cananore. This success of Portuguese traders in India led to a race among European powers for share of trade, and trading companies were formed, which accumulated capital through the sale of shares among merchants. Thus, English, Dutch, French, and Danish trading companies were formed in the 17th century. Initially, the Portuguese has monopolized the trade with India and even established their bases for trade in Goa, Daman and Diu along the west coast of India. However, when the British began taking interest in trade, the Portuguese were unable to compete with them. Now let's talk about the Dutch merchants. The Dutch merchants started their company in 1592. In 1595, Cornelius Houtman set out for India and returned with a large cargo, and soon many trading companies came into existence. In 1602, all the Dutch companies were merged into the Dutch East India Company. The main Dutch settlements in India were Cochin and Nagapattam on Madras coast and Chinsura in Bengal. They controlled the spice trade markets after defeating the Portuguese and captured most of the territories. They had also set up factories in Tanjore in the south and Serampore in Bengal, but in 1845 they had to sell all the settlements to the British. Now we'll know about the French traders in India. When the Europeans were engaged in establishing their business in India, the French also established their company. In 1654, the French East India Company was formed, and in December 1667, the first French factory was established at Surat by Francis Caron. He also founded the settlement of Pondicherry under the grant from the ruler of Bijapur. And so, the French also established their settlement at Chandanagar, Balasore, and Kasim Bazar on the east coast and Mahe on the west coast. The French company had its headquarters in Pondicherry, and it had its naval base in the Indian Ocean in Mauritius and Reunion Islands, which were far away from India. Although the French were the last to arrive in India, but they were the only rival of the English in the whole region, and their intense rivalry resulted in the three Carnatic Wars in India. In the last, we come to the British traders in India. In order to have the trade dealings in India, the English established the East India Company in 1600. Sir Thomas Roe, who was a representative of the British, sought the permission of Jahangir to establish their business centers at Ahmedabad, Bhuj, and Agra. In 1639, the English laid the foundation of Madras and constructed the fort which was named as Fort St. George. Aurangzeb allowed British to establish their trade centers in Bengal, and so the foundation of Calcutta was also laid in 1690. A fort was also built that was known as Fort William. Even the Mughal Emperor Farooq Siyar allowed the English company to trade duty free in Bihar, Bengal, and Orissa in 1717, but in exchange of rupees 3,000 per annum. This made the position of the English very powerful, and they were successful in driving out the Portuguese and then the Dutch, and after a long struggle they were also successful in driving out the French from India in 1763. So this was all for this part of the chapter. Now, in the next part, we will cover the topics on the success of East India Company in establishing their trade in India, the Anglo-French rivalry in South India, and the reasons for success of the British.